Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Thursday, November 7th. Well, one cold shot will arrive in the Mid-Atlantic region in the overnight hours. The next couple of days, Friday and Saturday, will feature temperatures confined to the 40s for highs, up and down the I-95 corridor, and way down in the 20s tomorrow night, Friday night, which will be the coldest night of the year so far. Another cold shot arrives probably Monday night, Tuesday time frame, and that could be even colder in the early and middle parts of next week in the Mid-Atlantic region. Let's take a look at the current surface map, and here is the first cold front to deal with here, and it is a slow mover. It has some rain along it. We'll see the radar in a moment. Even some snow up in this part of the cold frontal system right now. There will be rain moving into the I-95 corridor, probably during the mid to late afternoon hours, and that should last into the evening hours. As the colder air pours in later on tonight, it's conceivable that there be a few snowflakes around as the precipitation winds down later on tonight, but certainly nothing serious in terms of snowfall for the I-95 corridor region. Downstream of the Great Lakes and in places like western New York up to northern Maine, there can be some accumulating snow over the next 12 hours, 12 to 24 hours or so. This will be a kind of a Great Lakes snow event, as will the next cold blast early to middle part of next week. Both of these situations will feature cold air moving over the still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes, and that causes instability in the lower part of the atmosphere and snow bands for the downstream locations. High pressure is pulling off the eastern seaboard right now. It's pretty much cloudy already in the I-95 corridor region, but these clouds will thicken up over the next few hours, and again, rain could break out during the mid to late afternoon hours. Well, here's the current radar across the nation from WSI's and Telecast.com. Again, some snow is already falling across southeastern Canada and the Great Lakes. Cold frontal boundary zone right in this region right here. Rain should move into the I-95 corridor region by late this afternoon, continue into the evening. Again, as the colder air starts to pour in later on tonight from the northwest, there can be a mixing with or a changeover to snow briefly in parts of the I-95 corridor. Of course, the favored portions of the I-95 corridor will be well to the north and west, where this mixing with or changing over to snow before ending occurs. And again, don't expect anything significant in the I-95 corridor region, but from the western part of New York all the way up to northern Maine, there can be a few inches and even locally heavy amounts in the eastern Great Lakes, as this again will turn into a pretty good Great Lakes snow event with cold air moving over the still relatively warm waters of the Great Lakes. Well, before we take a look at last night's GFS model run, let's take a look at the ensemble run in terms of the 850 millibar temperature anomalies going forward here. This is for the current 5-day period. Again, polar jet stream bringing cold air masses from way up in Canada across the Great Lakes into the Mid-Atlantic region. The arrival of a frontal passage later on tonight will usher in a cold air mass for this time of the year. Again, temperatures tomorrow night will be the lowest of the season so far, way down in the 20s in the immediate I-95 corridor region. Again, this is the average over the next 5 days. Let's go out even farther into the month of November. And here we go. This is days 6 to 10, running from November 12th to the 17th, basically centered on the middle part of November. Again, a widespread cold air outbreak. This one even reaching down into Florida, which has been very warm over the past several weeks, especially during the month of October. And don't be surprised if there's some record low temperatures set with this particular outbreak next week. It will be quite cold indeed for this time of the year. Meanwhile, out in the western U.S., warmer than normal, and that looks like the pattern probably through the winter season. Warmer than normal out there, and somewhat colder than normal up across the Great Lakes, Midwest, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast U.S. Well, now let's take a look at the 500 millibar forecast maps from last night's GFS model run. This is a 0Z model run. We'll talk a little bit about the snow threat for next week. There still is a chance of a rain changing to snow scenario at the onset of next week's cold blast in the eastern U.S. And we'll kind of take a look at some of the key players there. First of all, lots of energy here across the Great Lakes as we start the day on Thursday. And all of that is associated with the advancing colder air mass across the Great Lakes and ultimately into the mid-Atlantic northeast U.S. Here we go by later on tonight. That cold front should be clearing the eastern seaboard by the overnight hours, and it'll turn sharply colder, become breezy as well with winds out of the northwest. Friday will remain quite windy and way below normal for this time of the year. By morning, temperatures could be between 30 and 35 degrees in the immediate I-95 corridor region, and again holding in the 40s during the day on Friday and Saturday as well. Then we'll work through the weekend. It'll be a chilly weekend, and we'll start to focus in on more upper level energy dropping southeastward from Canada as we get into the early part of next week. This is a key player for potential snow in the mid-Atlantic region at the onset of that cold blast next week, and depending on how far south that upper level feature digs, if it could go farther south and east than is what is currently indicated, there'll be a better chance of a snow event in the mid-Atlantic region. But right now it's not all that impressive here. Definitely drops farther south and east in the current upper level low associated with this initial blast of cold air. But this is something we'll watch over the next few days, how that will develop into the early part of next week. And again, here, by this time the cold frontal system will be approaching the eastern seaboard, and low pressure is likely to form along that frontal boundary zone, and there can be a rain changing to snow scenario depending on the development of this upper level feature, and we'll monitor that over the next few days. Well, now let's look at the surface forecast maps from last night's 0Z GFS model run. Here is where that frontal system exists this morning. Strong, cold Canadian high pressure has dropped into the central plains. Again, rain moves into the I-95 corridor during the mid or late afternoon hours. It's cold enough for snow, or at least a changeover to snow, upstate Pennsylvania, western New York, all the way up to the northern part of Maine, and there can be some accumulations in that part of the northeast U.S. and localized heavier amounts just downstream of some of the Great Lakes, as again the Great Lakes snow machine will be turned on with this initial cold blast. Late tonight, could be a few flakes showing up in the skies in the I-95 corridor region. Don't expect any serious snow, however, and all of the precipitation moves out of here by morning. Basically a windy and cold day setting up on Friday with plenty of sunshine after the early morning clouds, but temperatures confined to the 40s, well below normal for this time of the year, and then dropping down into the 20s in the overnight hours going into Saturday morning. Basically a dry, chilly weekend, and then we'll focus in on the next cold blast. And look at this pressure grading here from a very strong high by late Saturday night, early Sunday in the southwestern part of Canada. Colder air already starting to pour into the northern plains, especially at this time frame on Sunday. Let's now move forward here, and remember we'll have that upper level energy dropping southeast from south central Canada across the Great Lakes, and that'll set off the development of low pressure along this frontal boundary zone. And indeed there can be a rain changing to snow situation in the mid-Atlantic region. This is a forecast map for Tuesday afternoon by last night's GFS model run. And again, a lot of this will dictate how far south and east that upper level feature moves during the early part of next week. Ultimately, the cold air blasts into the northeastern U.S., and by Tuesday night and Wednesday, very, very cold for this time of the year in the mid-Atlantic region throughout the northeast U.S. and Midwest. This is the forecast map for next Wednesday. 504 thickness here throughout the eastern Great Lakes. That is very, very cold air for this time of year. And again, expect some records to be set Tuesday, Wednesday time frame of next week, anywhere from the central to the eastern part of the nation. So two different cold blasts coming. One arrives late tonight, and the next one by the early to middle part of next week, probably Tuesday a time frame for the mid-Atlantic region, and that one, next week's cold blast, could have a rain changing to snow threat at the onset of next week's cold blast. That's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.